The true meaning of life lies in our ability to give it purpose. What keeps a human being going when everything seems lost? Perhaps the deepest answer is revealed in moments of great suffering. Austrian psychiatrist and philosopher Viktor Frankl, who endured years of horror in Nazi concentration camps, discovered an essential truth. Even in the most inhumane conditions, the human spirit can find purpose. Prisoners in the camps lived in a state of constant despair, facing hunger, cold, abuse, and the ever-present threat of death. Reduced to shadows of their former selves, they moved like herds without will, subjected to the cruelty of their captors and the indifference of a world that had forgotten them. In an environment where all freedom and dignity had been stripped away, what meaning could life still hold? What reason was there not to succumb to despair? Frankl concluded that there is always a reason to continue, even in the darkest circumstances. If suffering is inevitable, then it must have meaning, and discovering that meaning can give us the strength to endure any adversity. It is not pleasure, success, or power that ultimately drives human beings, but the search for meaning. Today, in a world revolving around mechanical work and excessive consumption, many experience an existential void, similar to that of the prisoners in the camps. Though the circumstances are different, the feeling of purposelessness still haunts people. We distract ourselves with fleeting pleasures and accumulate possessions. But deep down, we continue to ask ourselves, why are we here? Frankl observed that those who found a purpose, no matter how small, had a greater chance of survival. Some prisoners found meaning in helping others, in resisting with dignity, or in the hope of seeing their loved ones again. He himself, being a doctor, chose to stay in the camp to care for sick fellow prisoners rather than escape. His decision was not driven by a desire for recognition or personal gain, but by a greater purpose that gave meaning to his existence. In contrast, those who lost all hope often perished quickly. Frankl recounted the story of a prisoner who dreamed of a specific date when the war would end and they would be freed. When the day arrived and nothing changed, disappointment consumed him completely. His immune system collapsed, and he soon died of typhus. This story demonstrates that when a person loses their sense of purpose, both body and mind begin to wither. It is easy to wonder whether it is always possible to find meaning in suffering. Are there not situations too extreme, where pain is so overwhelming that it nullifies any choice? Frankl responded with a powerful affirmation. While external circumstances may be beyond our control, the attitude we take toward them remains our most intimate and powerful choice. Even in concentration camps, there were those who shared their last piece of bread, who offered words of comfort amidst the misery. This proved that, although everything had been taken from them, they still retained the freedom to decide who they wanted to be. Everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances. Frankl wrote, "The modern world may not face the horrors of concentration camps, but it does face a crisis of meaning. We struggle between the alienation of purposeless work and the temptation of instant gratification. In this context, it is easy to fall into nihilism and question why we should keep going. However, Frankl reminds us that life is not about what we can take from it, but what we can give to it. So, how do we find our purpose? Frankl identified three main paths: through work and creation, through connection with others, and through the meaning we can give to suffering. The first path involves dedicating our lives to work that transcends personal gain, whether in art, science, or any activity that brings value. The second lies in love, offering ourselves to others, truly seeing another human being and recognizing in them a reason to exist. The third, and most difficult, is our attitude towards suffering. Instead of seeing it as a meaningless burden, we can view it as an opportunity for growth and transcendence. The meaning of life is not a universal formula, but something each person must discover on their own journey. We cannot simply invent it, but we can uncover it in our experiences, relationships, and how we face adversity. In the end, it is not the pursuit of pleasure or success that will save us from despair, but the ability to find purpose in every moment, even in the darkest ones. The modern world does not face the horrors of concentration camps, but it does suffer from a crisis of meaning that manifests in insidious ways. We struggle between the alienation of purposeless work, the saturation of digital stimuli that distract us from ourselves, and the temptation of instant gratification, which offers fleeting pleasure but leaves us empty in the long run. In this context, it is easy to fall into nihilism and question why we should keep going when life seems to lack direction. However, Frankl reminds us that existence is not defined by what we can take from it, but by what we are willing to give to it. So, how do we find our purpose in this sea of uncertainty? Frankl identified three fundamental paths to giving meaning to our lives. The first is through work and creation, dedicating ourselves to an endeavor that transcends personal gain and adds value to the world, whether in art, science, education, or any effort that enriches others. The second lies in our connection with others, genuine giving, the ability to truly see another human being, recognize their worth, and in that encounter, find a reason to exist. Finally, the third path is the most complex and demanding, finding meaning in suffering. When faced with adversity, we have the choice to surrender to pain or transform it into an opportunity for growth and transcendence. The meaning of life is not a universal formula or a fixed destination that everyone must reach in the same way. It is an intimate and unique search for each individual, a revelation that emerges from our experiences, relationships, and the way we choose to respond to adversity. We cannot fabricate it arbitrarily, but we can discover it in the process of living with authenticity and commitment. In the end, it is not the pursuit of pleasure, wealth, or recognition that will save us from despair, but our ability to give purpose to every moment, even in the darkest times, even when all seems lost. Because, as Frankl affirmed, human beings can endure anything except the absence of meaning. Finally, the third path is the most complex and demanding, finding meaning in suffering. When we face adversity, we have the choice to surrender to the pain or transform it into an opportunity for growth and transcendence. This choice is not simple or immediate. It requires deep introspection and a willingness to look beyond the immediate suffering. Pain, when embraced with a resilient attitude, can become a silent teacher that reveals aspects of ourselves we did not know, strengthening our ability to endure difficulties with greater fortitude. It is not about glorifying suffering or romanticizing pain, but about recognizing that often life confronts us with inevitable trials. In those moments, our attitude and our interpretation of the experience determine whether suffering destroys us or elevates us. There are those who, in the midst of absolute despair, manage to find a spark of meaning that sustains them, not because the suffering itself is valuable, but because they have chosen to give it purpose. It is the difference between succumbing to despair and transforming anguish into a drive for transcendence. The meaning of life is not a universal formula or a fixed destination that we must all reach in the same way. It is not something imposed or predefined, but an intimate and unique search for each individual, a revelation that arises from our experiences, relationships, and the way we choose to respond to challenges. We cannot fabricate it arbitrarily or impose it as an absolute truth, but we can discover it in the process of living with authenticity, responsibility, and commitment. In the end, it is not the pursuit of pleasure, wealth, or recognition that will save us from despair, but the ability to give purpose to every moment, even in the darkest times, even when everything seems lost. It is in those extreme circumstances where true meaning emerges most clearly, as we face the essence of our existence and the need to find a reason to keep going. Because, as Frankl stated, a human being can endure anything except the absence of meaning. And it is precisely this absence that we must avoid at all costs, seeking in every experience, no matter how difficult, a reason to continue.